Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: explore the peaks, lakes, and meadows of the Canadian Rockies. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Lianne Thompson. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away, Lianne.
Hey everyone, thanks Rob so much, and thanks for joining us today. I love the Canadian Rockies trips. I'm super excited to get started on them in just over a month. So I'm really pumped to share with you kind of a little bit more information about the itinerary. We'll get into some natural history stuff, of course. But yeah, let's start rock and roll on our Canadian Rockies trip. First of all, I will introduce myself. So I'm Lianne Thompson, as Rob said. So I'm an expedition leader with NatHab. I started back in 2018. I do several of our trips: polar bears, northern lights, beluga whales. Also done the Cotswolds trips, Canadian Rockies, Iceland. Yeah, I do a whole bunch of them, but the Canadian Rockies ones are really near and dear to my heart, and that is because I live just a couple hours away from where our itinerary actually starts. So I live in interior British Columbia. So I'm just an hour and a half from from Kootenay National Park, one of the national parks we visit on this trip, and yeah, just a few hours from Banff. And I love these mountains. I think they're absolutely stunning, and I love getting people to come to them and just kind of be in awe of the beauty of them. People like to compare them to a lot of other mountain ranges and then come here and are just in absolute awe. So my role as an expedition leader, obviously to be a naturalist. So I have a degree in zoology and a master's in conservation education. Essentially, I feel like I just get paid to be a nerd, which is really fun for me. I am also a photographer. So throughout this trip, we will talk about our photography expeditions. So those are new starting this year. We do have two photo expeditions we've made tweaks and changes to our itinerary so that we can really capitalize on our photo opportunities in the national parks. So that is a little bit about me, but we'll focus on the itinerary, I think, right now. So this is kind of just like a really easy map to look at to figure out what it is that we're going to be doing. So we start on the right-hand side. You'll land in Calgary Airport. That one's to come. Then we'll head over into Banff National Park, and most people are very familiar with Banff. It's a pretty famous park. Jasper as well. Most people have heard of Jasper, but we do also add in visits to Yoho National Park as well as Kootenay National Park. And so all of these make up our Rocky Mountain National Parks, but Yoho and Kootenay, they tend to be a lot lesser known. They are on the BC side, so they're in the province of British Columbia. Many less people visit those parks, but they are absolutely beautiful. So throughout our trip, we do visit all four of those national parks. We spend time in all of them. Once we're kind of done in our national park stuff, we head a little bit further west into British Columbia, and we will go and do our heli-hiking just on the outskirts of the Bugaboo Provincial Park. So lots of beauty, essentially, is what happens here. Then we spin back around, and then you'll head out of Calgary. So really simplified map, but just to give you an idea of kind of what it is that we're going to be doing, the space that we'll be in. But we'll keep going. I said more to come on Calgary Airport. This is where you'll land. I fly in and out of Calgary a lot. It's actually one of my favorite airports. It's large, but also feels small. It's quite quick. I find that people coming in and having to go through customs is pretty fast as well. I've never really had to wait very long. So it's usually a very smooth entrance into Calgary Airport. And of course, from there, you'll get picked up by a shuttle, a transfer that will bring you over into Banff. So depending, of course, on traffic, the time of day you come in, but about an hour and a half or so shuttle into Banff town site. So Banff, of course, is within Banff National Park, but this is kind of the Banff town that you'll see on this picture here. And we do start our trip here. So we'll start at night, but I do recommend that people come in, if you come in a day early, even to have the full day prior to our welcome dinner. There's a lot to do in the city of Banff, the town of Banff. There's lots of different restaurants, there's shopping if you're into that sort of thing, but there's also several museums. There's a lot of really beautiful kind of short walks that you can do not far outside of Banff town. So if you're wanting to get acclimated, if you are coming from farther away and need to adjust to a time change, or whatever it is. But Banff, I definitely recommend coming in and spending some time in Banff. On our trip, we don't really spend time in Banff town itself, just because we want to make sure that we're exploring all of the nature. But do come and spend some time in Banff because it is a really lovely place. When we are in Banff, I'll talk about our lodging first up. So when we're in Banff, we do stay at the Moose Hotel and Suites, and this is just a short walk away from kind of the downtown core of Banff town itself. And but thankfully it is still nice and quiet, so it's just a short walk away. But it's a really lovely hotel. I also recommend people walk around the hotel too, because kind of in the center courtyard area, there's some older historic buildings that we talk about throughout the trip too. So yeah, enjoy and explore Moose Hotel. We do only have our like one welcome dinner night that's there. Of course, if you decide to come earlier, you can stay there more. But as soon as our welcome dinner day is done, or our welcome dinner is done, then the next day we kind of get going and we move locations, and we are situated for 4 nights at the Lake Louise Inn. And this is a really great central spot for us to kind of go and explore all of these national parks. If we were to stay directly in Banff, it could add about an hour extra drive, just heading up to Lake Louise and then going further north, further west, whatever it is that we're wanting to explore. So Lake Louise, we do stay here for the 4 nights. It's a great central location. I always like to talk about how it has one of the most ridiculous breakfast buffets I've ever seen in my life. They have so much food there, including a chocolate fountain. So if you at 8 a.m. need to dip marshmallows in a chocolate fountain, your dreams can come true here at Lake Louise Inn. Yeah, it's a really comfy, cozy place here. So we'll stay here for 4 nights. The other important aspect to talk about before we dive into itinerary is, of course, food. If you've been on a NatHab trip before, you know you will not go hungry, and that reigns true for our Canadian Rockies trip as well. And here we've tried to kind of create a balance between having some field meals, meaning picnics, as well as having some restaurant food. So time spent in restaurants versus time spent in the field. We go for some of our field meals and our picnics so that we can kind of eat on the go. We do have a field operations specialist, so our staff that's with us as well, that can kind of create some of these really awesome moments in the background. We can roll up and have these beautiful picnics in stunning areas, and then we can keep on going throughout our day. But we do have some lunch times that we will be stopping at restaurants on the left-hand side. Believe it or not, I feel like the glass maybe gives it away, but we are sitting at a restaurant for that left-hand side picture. So if we are having our lunch times at restaurants, we've aimed to have them on picnic or patios and having really amazing views. So just making sure that we can spend as much time as possible enjoying all of the views of the Canadian Rockies. Our dinners we will be having at restaurants as well. And in the Rocky Mountain National Parks, I find that it kind of takes on a bit more of a European style of eating, in that in North America, we tend to like to sit down, we order our food, we eat our food, and away we go. Europeans, it's a lot more of a leisure time. They like for people to sit, relax, enjoy. And so we can kind of get some notes of that in our meal times in the Canadian Rockies. They tend to be at a slightly slower pace, but it's a great time for us to sit back, relax, and reflect on the awesome days that we're having. So that's kind of food. One other thing to talk about is our transportation. So NatHab, we do partner with a company called Discover Banff Tours. If you hear me say DBT, that's who I'm referring to. That's kind of what we call them all the time, so it might slip out to call them that. But Discover Banff Tours, it's an awesome company for us to work with for a couple of different reasons. One is that it comes with a driver, but they're not just a driver, they're also a guide themselves. So they have an absolute wealth of knowledge, and the expedition leaders and the guides that work with DBT, they work really hard together so that we can build a whole story and get people to understand the history, the people, the ecology, as much about the Canadian Rockies as we possibly can. But in having two separate guides, it also means that when we're on foot and deciding what activities we like to do, we have the option to split the group. So some people come and they want to move at a slower pace, and some people have come to the mountains because they want to go hiking. And so we can kind of split the group and both have naturalists to tell you more information. The other key thing with Discover Banff Tours is the fact that there are many areas in the national parks that private vehicles are not allowed to go to, or that you have to park miles away and then walk extra to get to an area, or you have to sit and wait for a parking spot to open in order for you to get to many of these locations. Discover Banff Tours, they have this magic special ticket and they can get everywhere that we need to go whenever they want to, essentially. So we really capitalize on that. We don't have to wait in lines. We don't have to park a kilometer or a mile away from where it is that we're trying to get to. So we get front row parking all of the time. So we're super happy about our partnership with them and we love working with them. Their guides are amazing. All right, let's get started. We can talk more about the itinerary. So I mentioned already, it starts in Banff, and after our welcome dinner, our first morning, we do start talking about the introduction of national parks in Canada, because Banff was the first national park in Canada. So it was created in 1885, and it actually was created to protect the hot springs that were discovered. You can see I use quotations on that one. There was 3 railway workers that discovered these hot springs, and of course these hot springs and this whole area have been being used by Indigenous people for hundreds, sometimes several thousand years. And so it wasn't exactly a discovery, but kind of having all of these white Europeans coming in and discovering these areas, they then decided they wanted to protect it. So Banff was created to protect this hot springs. And of course, it has expanded a lot since then. The initiatives of why Banff exists have changed. It's not just the hot springs. We'll talk about the natural beauty and the ecology and all the wildlife that lives there, but it started essentially from the hot springs. So in the morning, we see some of these kind of core components and things that led to the inception of the national parks. So we do talk about history and we'll visit several of these locations and see lots of the beauty that is there. Now with the photo expedition, we have altered it. Of course, we'll still talk about history, but we're going to alter our trips so that we can maximize our amount of time of getting the photography experiences. So instead of visiting some of the more historical parts, we can end up going straight to some of our locations to set up for our photos. So we'll be heading to various different lakes, of course, trying to get some of these really beautiful mountain reflection opportunities whenever we can. But yeah, so we've really altered the photo expedition to make sure that we're capitalizing on our daylight hours, our timings, and trying to get to spots where we'll have less people, maybe wander a little bit more off the beaten path and not just right along the lake shore, and head over so that we can set up some more, as much as we can, some private opportunities with the photos. So that's kind of our morning one. And also on our day one, we do go to Kootenay National Park. So we actually cross the border, we leave Alberta behind, we head over into British Columbia. You know, Kootenay National Park was established in 1920, and the place that we hit up is a beautiful place called Marble Canyon. So here we can also start really painting the picture of why do the mountains, why do they look the way that they look? What happened? We'll talk about some mountain building, but here we talk a lot about glaciers, we talk about canyon formation. Why does this canyon exist? The influence of glaciers over the landscape, the influence of water carving into these landscapes. And the beauty of coming into Kootenay for the afternoon is that there is so many less people. Some people have heard of Johnston Canyon, which is in Banff National Park. If you go to Banff, if you go to Johnston Canyon, it'll have like 100 times more people than we do here at Marble Canyon. It's a beautiful canyon, Marble Canyon, and I think it's just so much fun to come and visit that area. So we spend our afternoon in Kootenay National Park. After that, we do head over and go check into Lake Louise Hotel and have our first night there. And then our next morning, this one, oh yeah, our photo expedition. They're new this year, so I have to make sure I add this in. For our photo expeditions, we are making sure that we're spending extra time and kind of adding more photo stops as we go so that, again, we can capitalize a lot on this natural beauty. But our next morning, we go and do the iconic sunrise at Moraine Lake. This is included in both the regular itineraries as well as the photo itineraries, and depending on when you've signed up for the Canadian Rockies trip, the wake-up call, I don't know if you've Googled when sunrise happens around the Moraine Lake area, but it is quite early, so we're up at like 4, 5 a.m. Depending on the trip, so that we can come up and enjoy this sunrise. It is early. I know it can be a little bit painful when that alarm goes off, but trust me, it is so worth it. We'll talk about Lake Louise next. We're headed over there, and it's certainly one of the most famous lakes. But to me, I think Moraine Lake is far more stunning. It's so, so beautiful, and getting to come up here at sunrise is absolutely incredible. This view right here, the Valley of the 10 Peaks, it was actually on the Canadian $20 bill for many, many years. So this is our $20 view, just to give you an idea of what else you'll be seeing when you're in the national parks here. When we arrive, we do kind of go up a bit like kind of a makeshift staircase, essentially rocks that have been formed into a staircase here. So we head up what's known as the rock pile. We'll get stationed up here and hang out for a little while to watch the sunrise. One of the things that's awesome about living in the mountains, we do get very hot, hot temperatures here, but in the overnight, the temperatures drop. So this morning can be quite cool. We'll talk about what clothes I recommend to bring, but layers are a good thing to have. I do bring gloves. I'll have like my down jacket with me. I'll have a sweater. In Canada, we call, the beanies, your hats, we call them toques. I'll make sure to have that with me as well, because this morning can be quite chilly. And we arrive in a time frame to make sure that we're not going to miss the sunrise. So we end up being up here for about an hour. So, and we're not moving around a ton. We come up here and we station ourselves up here. So we like to have lots of layers. And Moraine Lake is actually an example of how Parks Canada is kind of changing their rules and regulations to protect the integrity of these areas. Moraine Lake actually has a very small parking lot. When I visited it, like 6 years ago, I had to wake up at probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, pull down my whole tent because I was camping, pack everything into the car, drive up, and then park here at like 3 o'clock in the morning and go back to sleep in my vehicle, because the parking lot can be full by 4, maybe 5 a.m. They've changed it. Last year was the first year that no more private vehicles are allowed to even go to Moraine Lake. To visit here, you either have to pay for and wait for and get on a shuttle, or you have to be part of a tour like the one that we're on. So with Discover Banff, we can come right up here and get right going at Moraine Lake. It is absolutely stunning, and I love, love, love the sunrise, but one of my other favorite things to do while we're here is to look for the pika. I learned when I started these trips that people in the States, you call it a pika, but we do call it a pika here in Canada. As we're going up that rock pile that I talked about with the stairs, it's actually perfect habitat for this little animal. So the pika, aka a rock rabbit, it is related to the rabbit family, but it's quite small. And as I'm going up, I don't talk a lot as we're going up that rock pile. One, it's very early in the morning, but the other reason is I'm listening to see if I can hear a pika. If people are familiar with the pika noise, it's just like a meep. And so as we're kind of walking, all I'm doing is listening to hear. And I feel like my ears have become hyper tuned to hearing pika sounds. And then I just whip around, and you have to watch in the rocks to see if you can see the movement. They're not that big, but you can see them scurrying around. And what these animals are doing is actually going around and collecting flowers, they're collecting hay, and what you'll see sometimes is these little piles. And so they will go collect all of this stuff and they lay it out in the sun so that the sun dries it, and then they actually pull it under the rocks into their den areas so that it is preserved for this winter, or preserved over winter. Pika, they are active year round. They do not hibernate. So in the winter, everything kind of gets covered in snow, and then they're underneath in their rock habitat eating all of this delicious dried grass. So it's how they're preserving it and making sure that they can exist throughout the winter time. Researchers will go and they'll actually try to find all of these piles of hay or of grass and of flowers, because finding the amount of food that is being left out to dry can give them an indication of what the population size is. So we can see if it's increasing and we can see if it's decreasing. And one thing that we are seeing with pika is that they are being affected by climate change, and their populations are decreasing. Pika are living high up in the mountains in our alpine ranges, where it does stay a lot colder. And with climate change, it's getting warmer and warmer. It's allowing more predators, more pests to come in. It's affecting the vegetation. It also affects snowfall as well. So how much snowfall is coming in, protecting the denning. If you've got lots of freeze thaw events, it can really impact on their denning areas. And with many animals, if you're an animal that's used to the cold and your climate starts to warm, you can just move to a colder spot. But if you're an animal that already lives at the top of a mountain, there's no more up to go. So they're really seeing a decline in the population of these pika. So it's really fun to be able to see them. And we have a pretty good success rate. I see them on most of my trips, so lots of fun to watch them scurrying around. The other animal that I'll be on the lookout for is a Clark's nutcracker. They're very popular over at Moraine Lake. You'll just see them flying around. They make lots of calls too. And this is a bird that's in the corvid family, so they're related to crows and ravens and jays and magpies and tree peas and a bunch of other animals. If you've ever been on a trip with me, you are probably familiar with my love of the corvid variety. I love these types of birds. They are incredibly smart. And one of the things that these birds do that is incredibly smart is their caching behavior. So they're active all the time. And in the summertime is when you'll have a lot more food. So in the summer, they collect a ton of food. And instead of storing it underground in their dens like a pika, they actually scatter it out on the landscape. They hide food all over the place in these caching locations. Like a Clark's nutcracker, they've been documented of caching over 100,000 pieces of food in a very short duration of time. And they have a very incredible spatial memory to know where all of these things are stored. Do they have a 100% success rate? No. So that is actually where their relationship with the white bark pine tree actually comes into play. So Clark's nutcracker, white bark pine, they're very well known together. And that is because the white bark pine cone doesn't open enough to allow the seeds to come out and disperse. And this is a problem if you're a tree. You need those seeds to get out because how else is reproduction happening? Enter Clark's nutcracker. You can see that very long beak. It is a specialized beak that's the length of a perfectly fit to be able to get those seeds out of the white bark pine. We'll go around and see we'll see other birds in the national parks. The gray jay can often get confused for our Clark's nutcracker, but the Clark's nutcracker has that much longer beak. So they take those seeds, they hide them for later. It's a great nutritional value for the Clark's nutcracker, but they don't remember everything. So then when they have caches that they don't remember, those can then germinate and become new trees. So it's this interesting relationship where the Clark's nutcracker can help the white bark pine by making sure that their seeds get spread, but the Clark's nutcracker then is essentially cultivating its own food. It's very smart. It's very cool. We can dive more into corvids at another time. I could do an entire webinar on corvids. Maybe one day I will. After we've left Moraine Lake, we do head down to the iconic Lake Louise. And there are many people that come to visit these national parks. About 4.5 million people are coming to them every single year, and a lot of it is to come to Lake Louise. So you can imagine when we show up, this lakeshore where this photo was taken is littered with people. But what many people do is they go park their car, they walk out, they stand in this spot, they take a photo, and they walk back to their car and they leave. Spend 20 minutes maybe at Lake Louise. We have decided to take a different approach. Of course, you'll go to the lakeshore, but we then have the opportunity of exploring more of it. And this is where we can split our group. On the left-hand side, you can see all that not grassy, it looks kind of maybe like grass, but treed area. There is a somewhat strenuous hike that we can do that's uphill, and we can get away from folks that way and go and enjoy the view looking back on Lake Louise. For folks that maybe want to go a little bit slower, you can go around the other way and you'd end up on the right-hand side of our picture and just kind of follow along the lakeshore. So it stays pretty flat. If you just get out of this area where the photo is taken, walk 10 minutes in any direction, you lose, I would say, probably about 90+% of the people that come to visit Lake Louise. It's incredible how many people don't even try to explore it. And that's something that we love to do. Let's explore Lake Louise. We can also talk about the history of Lake Louise. Tom Wilson was the first white man to lay eyes on Lake Louise. Of course, again, Indigenous people in this area and using this area for many, many, many years prior to. But Tom Wilson showed up, saw this beautiful emerald color, and he goes, I will call that Emerald Lake. But we will talk about him on our trips quite a bit. Tom had a tendency of doing that. He'd see a beautiful emerald lake and he'd call it Emerald Lake. You can't have every lake named Emerald Lake. So it did actually get renamed several years later. It was actually after Princess Louise Alberta, who was the fourth daughter of Queen Victoria. And so that's where Lake Louise got its name. But Lake Louise became particularly famous in 1896 when an American named Philip Stanley Abbott was actually climbing Mount Lefroy, which you can see in the back left of the picture here. And unfortunately, while he was climbing, he did fall to his death. And at this point, they talked about banning tourism in this area altogether. They did not want people to be coming to the national parks, climbing these beautiful peaks, and falling to their death. That's not what it's about. So they almost banned tourism completely. But we had this railway that got built across Canada, and the construction of the railway almost bankrupted the country of Canada. And so the railway used tourism as a way of restoring our economy. So they do not want to get rid of tourism here, but we have to figure out how to do it safe. And so it became the birthplace of guided tourism because they introduced the Swiss guides. So guides from Switzerland have been climbing their mountains for many years. They came over and then they were guiding people how to climb the mountains safely in our Canadian Rocky Mountain National Parks. And this is still something that is very evident today. You'll see evidence of Swiss culture. We also have the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, the ACMG, and it essentially was created because of our Swiss guides. So people have to go through a certification process. All of the guides that work at the Heli Lodge that we'll be talking about shortly, they're all certified through that. So this whole program kind of was developed as a result of our Swiss guides. So we'll spend our morning at Lake Louise, and then we actually leave from there and we go and head up what's called the Lake Louise gondola. And you'll see on the right-hand side picture, there's the option of an open gondola, or you can be in a more closed gondola. It's up to you. The gondola itself, 10-15 minutes up. And these are the types of views that we're getting that whole time there. So yes, we go up for the views. We go up, we have lunch up at the top and enjoy all of these views. But one of the other reasons why we've added the Lake Louise gondola to our trip is because it is prime grizzly bear habitat. A whole section of this, a whole area of the Lake Louise ski hill is closed off. People are not allowed to walk in it. We can only gondola over it. And it's because it becomes an entire meadow of flowers. And this is like a feeding fest for our grizzly bears. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to do another webinar and we'll talk more about grizzly bears. Again, you saw I guide bear trips. I could talk about bears for hours and hours and hours, but that's not the point of this webinar. We'll talk about them at another date in a couple of weeks, but this is a really wonderful opportunity for us to see the grizzly bears. Really excited when we do. Of course, it's nature. It is never guaranteed, but whenever we show up, we can use the staff there. They'll tell us what pillar they've been seen at, and we'll all just be trying to spot them. But it's a really awesome place. So that's kind of what we spend this day doing, exploring all angles of Lake Louise, see if we can spot our grizzly bears. We'll also, all folks will get a chance to see the flowers, but once we get up to the top of the gondola, there's a short walk that we do to get to lunch. And for our photo expeditions, we've kind of built in some extra time so that we can slowly take that walk, because I just talked about wildflowers. They're present all over the place. And so we really get to have a chance to stop and zoom in nice and tight, get into some of that macro photography and get some of the beautiful wildflowers of the Canadian Rockies. It's really interesting year after year, depending on our snowfall, our rainfall, when it started to get warm, our flowers are at different points. So I never know exactly what's going to be in bloom. We go up, we find out, and we see because it changes each year. I never know exactly what's going to happen, but we do have an abundance of wonderful flowers that we can go and take photos of. All right, we'll skip to the next day. The next day, we do go into Yoho National Park. This was our second national park created in 1886, so just a couple of years after Banff. And we do visit Emerald Lake. This was another one that Tom Wilson named Emerald Lake. This one stuck though. We called this one Emerald Lake. Because we've now come into British Columbia, we've come to Yoho National Park. Again, so many less people here. So we arrive, and along the lakeshore, it can be quite busy. This is a really popular spot where you can choose to go canoeing if it's something that you're interested in, but we take our time at Yoho. Many people come and they stand about where I took this photo, and then again, they get back in their cars and away they go. But we like to do a whole walk. So you can see that big area where it's grassy in the middle of all that forest. That's an old avalanche path. So we here get really into ecological succession, and we talk about avalanches. We can talk more about fires. We can talk about how the trees change. There's also a ton of wildflowers that exist here as well. So there's so much to talk about and explore and go for a really, really lovely walk. One thing that folks often know about Emerald Lake, but maybe not everyone, is that it's also quite famous for its loons. I love walking around Emerald Lake and hearing our loon call. Then we all just frantically look for that loon because they're really, really popular here. They're oftentimes found on this lake. So love coming to Yoho and hanging out in around Emerald Lake. Also, in that area, while we're walking along the lake shore around Emerald Lake, we can look up and see some of the mountain ranges. And these mountain ranges are quite famous for the Burgess Shale. If you're not familiar with what the Burgess Shale is, it is a fossil area. It was a UNESCO heritage site. It was at one point just exclusively one, and now it's kind of been expanded to include other things. But it is one of the most significant fossil areas in the world. 1909, a guy named Charles Walcott discovered the Burgess Shale, and people to this day are continuing to study and collect. Why was it so famous? It is famous because it is actually soft-bodied fossils. And if you know much about fossils, it's often bones. And so when we talk about our soft-bodied animals, we don't have a lot about the history of them because you just don't get fossils of soft-bodied animals. They're not having all of that bone structure. So when this Burgess Shale area was discovered, it actually revolutionized the way we thought about creation of life on Earth. Now, this is a very complex topic, and luckily we have David Moore. He's a geologist, he's a guide, he wears many hats, but he's part of the Burgess Shale Geoscience Foundation, and he comes and does an hour-long talk that discusses the Burgess Shale. It's an incredible talk. Every single time it is different. We have him for about an hour, and without a doubt, after every single trip, after every time he speaks, people come up and they're like, I could listen to him talk for 5 hours straight because he does it in such a fascinating way. He'll make you understand and fall in love with fossils and with evolution of life on Earth. It's absolutely incredible. So we're really lucky that he comes and does a talk with us. You can hike up to the Burgess Shale location, but it is, I think, about a 10-hour day, 8 to 10-hour day. So it is a long, strenuous hike. So we take the slightly easier way and have him come chat with us. Also, while we're in Yoho National Park, we do visit Takaka Falls. Takaka, it's a Cree word, and it does mean magnificent, and it is certainly that. We make sure that we spend some time here with our photo expeditions. Again, we've added in extra time so we can really capitalize on our photo opportunities here. But not only are we here for this stunning waterfall, we also will be looking for mountain goats. It's nature. It's never promised, but up in all of the rocky areas, we'll have scopes and we're looking in our binoculars and we are trying to see if we can find these mountain goats. It's a perfect mountain area for them. So it's an awesome spot for us to visit. And that's kind of our afternoon or our day in Yoho is going off many, we've got other stops that we do as well, but those are kind of our main features. The following day, our last full day in the Rocky Mountain National Parks, we drive the Icefields Parkway. Many people have heard of this because it is listed as being one of the world's most beautiful drives. Photos, we'll obviously make sure we do lots of stops to take a lot of photo opportunities. This will happen, of course, in the regular itinerary and our photo itineraries. Again, we've built more time in to make sure this can happen, but lots of incredible views. When we're driving, we will also be looking for various wildlife. So we've got bears, we've got bighorn sheep, moose, elk. There's a whole bunch of animals that we can be searching for. And the entire time that we are in the Rocky Mountain National Parks, of course, we're going to be looking for wildlife. NatHab, we're well known for being a wildlife tour operator, although we are nature, so we focus on all of our nature, but we're looking for wildlife whenever we possibly can. But driving that Icefields Parkway is a really popular place for us to see a lot of animals. We cover a good amount of ground in that day, so our chances are good of us finding things. However, I do also like to talk about wildlife safety. I love Parks Canada for their commitment to wildlife safety. We have sections of our highway that during certain times of year, or it can spontaneously happen at any point, that areas are designated as no stopping zones. If you see a bear on the side of the road, it does not matter. You are not allowed to stop. And this might get frustrating for us sometimes. Even me, I'm a photographer. I want to take those photos. But if we're stopping, not only is it dangerous for us, we can create traffic jams and people's lives can be at risk. It's also really dangerous for our wildlife. So they're really strict on that. We'll stop, we'll take photos whenever we possibly can, but know that this is a limitation that we do have. This year, in particular has become quite a talk. And that is because within Yoho National Park that I was just talking about, there is a white grizzly bear. And she, this year, actually came out of den with 2 cubs. The 2 cubs are brown. They're looking more like a grizzly bear, but people are kind of flocking in to try and see her. So again, not only dangerous for people, but also dangerous for the fact that what impact is that going to have on this rare white grizzly bear? We want to make sure that she and all the other animals are staying safe. So they've created legal no stopping zones. And there are photographers, like really famous photographers within the national parks, that they themselves are refusing to go out to go and find this bear because they simply do not want to promote people chasing after and making sure they're going after this bear. It's really important that we are respecting them and respecting their space. So all those things are just really important for us to keep in mind when we are talking about wildlife viewing along the roads. Oops, sorry, I accidentally skipped there. As we're looking for wildlife, of course, we're going to make many stops. Pito Lake is one of them. Many people are quite familiar with this one. So Pito Lake is named after Bill Pito, who was an outfit, a guide, a wrangler. It was in the early 1990s. He was kind of particularly known as being a great grumpy guy. We could tell lots of stories on him, but I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to have to put that aside. But we do stop at Pito Lake. Our photo expeditions will make sure we've got extra time to stop here and really capitalize on photos. But it is a glacier-fed lake. On the left-hand side, outside of view of this photo, it's quite long, we can actually see where the glacier is coming down. And so we are at risk of losing this lake because of climate change, because of our melting glaciers. At some point, there's going to no longer be a glacier for it to feed into this beautiful lake. We do also have this emerald color. So we've seen this color in Emerald Lake, in Pito Lake, in Moraine Lake, in Lake Louise. And the color actually comes from the glaciers as well. So the glaciers will bring a whole bunch of stuff down into particles into the lake, and we have this very fine glacial flour is what it's called. And it's so fine that it ends up kind of suspending itself in the water column instead of completely settling if it was so heavy. And it just reflects light in various ways. And the way that it has done, it makes this very emerald color. We can get more into the science of that too if you come on the trip. Lots of fun. Pito Lake is just one of the spots. We do also get all the way up to Athabasca Glacier, and here we go on an Indigenous-led glacier walk. Again, Indigenous relationships, whole other many webinars, many people who could speak on behalf of this, but it is something that we love incorporating into our trips in Canada because it's become so prominent. We want to make sure our Indigenous voices are heard, and it's one of the ways that we've made this trip really unique is by having this Indigenous-led glacier walk. So instead of walking us all the way up and all the way down, we try to expedite the process so we can spend as much time enjoying various views. We do actually take one of these big ice explorer vehicles that you can see in the right-hand side. We're with a bunch of other people as well, but we get up to the glacier walk, and instead of getting off of the ice explorer, having 10 minutes and then getting back on the vehicle and coming back down, we go up. And then we go off on our own private group with this Indigenous-led glacier walk, hear about their connection to the land, to ice, to water, all of that kind of stuff. It's a really beautiful walk, and I absolutely love it. We can have some incredible photo opportunities on the glacier. There was one day last year that I was out there, and it was the most beautiful glacier I've ever seen. And I have been on this glacier so many times. So every day it can be quite different, the way that the light is reflecting. Oh, it's so beautiful. All right, I think that's as much as I have time to ramble on about the national parks. But we've got many days worth of ramblings if you do come on the trip, so please do join us. With many of the Nat Hab trips, we tend to have incredible stuff and then it ends with a bang, right? We've got that really iconic thing that we end on. And for this trip, it is, of course, our time at the Bugaboo CMH Lodge. So it is a helicopter lodge. We meet at a base, we get on a helicopter, and we fly up to this lodge that you can see in the top left-hand side. Really comfortable, beautiful rooms with stunning views. We also have this lovely lounge area that people can hang out in. They do have this wonderful rooftop hot tub, so make sure you bring your bathing suits. There's always going to be time to enjoy that, but the whole area is absolutely beautiful. The lodge itself is so well run. Their guides are incredible. The food is amazing. I love everything about CMH Lodge. 12 out of 10 stars. I should probably give it more than that number of stars. It's so fun. But we go there, of course, for the heli-hiking. So let's talk about the heli-hiking. Here, you will get familiar with something we call the heli-huddle. So you can see that there are people in the right-hand side. Those would be the guests, the ones standing, as well as the two on the left. Those are guides. And so when we are at the lodge, we are not at the lodge with just our group. We are at the lodge, and the lodge fits, 40-ish people, and we get split into different groups. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we have to get on and off a helicopter. This helicopter fits, I believe it's 11, maybe 12 people. And so we have to get on and off, and they're bringing groups and flying them all over the places. They don't have time to land, shut off the helicopter, load people up, start the helicopter, and go. Otherwise, it would make for very short hiking days. Instead, this is the way we'll do it. So it is the heli-huddle. We will be huddled down, waiting for this helicopter with this expert helicopter pilot who come and land it essentially right next to us. You can see how close it gets to us. You can see the wind. So sunglasses are a really great thing to have. We do also wear long sleeve shirts to protect from that. Yeah, all of that kind of stuff to protect. That lands, our gear gets put in, and then we load on the top. This may seem intimidating. I know the video might look like it's crazy windy, but you'll see all these people. Look how great they're doing on the right-hand side. It's not as intimidating as it looks, but it is important. Otherwise, it can be quite startling. So then we're on the helicopter, and then the helicopter takes off. This is a guide that's being left there over the snow. Absolutely stunning. But that is how we're kind of getting on and off into that helicopter. And the helicopter comes and brings us all over the place. And you might be thinking, oh, earplugs. Yes, I need to talk about earplugs. It's a good idea to have earplugs. I put the volume down very low on that helicopter, but it's a good idea to have them, or on that video, when you're in the helicopter, have earplugs just to help protect your ears. If you don't have them, it's okay, nothing is wrong, but it's a good idea to have earplugs. So if you've got earplugs, make sure you put them in your packing list. Really, really, really recommend it. When we're splitting ourselves into our groups, the staff at CMH Lodge, they do work really hard to make sure that every single person that comes to CMH is getting the experience that they want from there. Some people, they show up and they want to stop and smell the flowers and take pictures of the flowers and lay down in the moss and have a nice nap, and just really take in all the sunshine. Other people come and they want to hike and hike. How many kilometers can I hike in a day? How high up can I go? So it's all across the board. So depending on how many people are at their lodge, they do tend to split everyone, all of the people that are there, into about 5 groups. And it does mean the Nat Hab group, because we want to cater and make sure everyone's getting their experience, that we are the Nat Hab group gets split up and we're around other people. We get to make new friends once we're up at the CMH Lodge. So we can come here. You can have a very relaxed day where we do take it easy. We can have days where we're covering a little bit more land. Sometimes you can see ridgeline walks. They do make sure to include a variety of this for everyone. So even if you decide that you want to have a pretty slow-paced day, they still will make sure that you are getting stunning views, doing some slight ridgeline walking. But if you decide that you want to go more strenuous, then they just take you farther and farther, and you can kind of keep going. So it's not a set, this is the itinerary we do every day. I sit in on the meetings with the guides, and they do careful consideration about where people are going. They track how many people and how much time are spent in each different area, because we've got a lot of area in the Bugaboo Range, because we're wanting to make sure that we're not all crowding into the same area and negatively impacting the environment. They've done a lot of research, they've done trample plot studies, they've looked at the impact of people hiking in the mountain ranges, how it is impacting wildlife, how it is impacting flower growth, and then they've made specific choices to ensure that we are not having those impacts. So sometimes hikes are unavailable. If there are grizzly bears in the area, say if there's a mom and a cub, and especially if they're more nervous, if they're noticing a response to the helicopters, mountain goats as well, there are sometimes areas where they just don't go because they want to respect the wildlife. We have areas where we don't continue to go back in the exact same area because we want to protect the flowers. Same thing as with the national parks. We find that there's flowers all the time. It just depends on the year after year as to what's going on. If you are up for a real challenge, Bugaboo does also have something called the Via Ferrata. So you can see there's chains here. She's wearing a harness. It's essentially a chance for some rock climbing. If you look in the bottom left picture as well, you can kind of see some metal rungs, almost like a ladder that's going up. So this one is going to be more challenging for sure. It's more mentally challenging, I find, than physically challenging, because obviously you've got a pretty steep cliff there. But if it is something that you're interested in, then we talk about that a lot more when we get there. Either way, no matter what group you're in, you're going to have an absolute blast and you're going to see incredible, incredible sights. I absolutely love the Bugaboos. I started hiking in them when I moved to BC, but I have to drive there many and hike really high up to get to the opportunities that it is that we get to see. So I feel so lucky to be able to spend some time in the Bugaboo parks, or in the Bugaboo Range. When we're there, we'll look for wildlife. So we'll look, we've got a ptarmigan, we've got a marmot here as well. I've seen them. We talk about geology and the rock formations, and I already spoke about the flowers. So we'll make sure in our photo trips as well to have time to take whatever photos it is that we can. Sorry, I'm just checking my timing here. Yeah, we'll take time to get photos wherever we can. But sunrise is also something that we can do here. This sunrise photo is actually one that's just taken near the lodge. So every itinerary, and you don't even need a guide to do this, you are welcome to get up every morning and enjoy the sunrise. This is just over from the lodge. But I use this picture because I've not gone on our sunrise helicopter yet. Our photo expeditions, they're new this year. And of course, weather pending, we can't do this if the weather is no good, but on our photo expeditions exclusively, we are adding in a sunrise helicopter venture. So we will get up early, it'll just be our photo groups, and then we'll head up and we'll get a helicopter to drop us off on top of a mountain range for some photos of the sunrise. So for our photo expeditions, there can be a couple of options for our sunrise, both in the helicopter as well as this stunning view that's just near the lodge. I'm so excited to go on our sunrise helicopter ride. It's going to be an absolute blast. Okay, we're getting down into the last few minutes of what I've got to say, but I want to talk about weather, things to bring. You might have seen in those pictures snow. Did you notice that? Snow in a lot of pictures. Almost every itinerary, almost every person will probably see snow on this trip. I've had many a snowball fight on a Canadian Rockies trip. So it can be chilly, but we also get very sunny. I've also had some of the worst burns in my life on a Canadian Rockies trip. So we'll also have rain, we'll also have wind. We'll likely encounter the whole range of things. So it's good to be nice and prepared for that. We do have pretty warm temperatures here. It can get quite warm. Like I've had it well over 90s for these trips. So it can get very warm. So I recommend t-shirts. You can have shorts, but again, you saw that heli huddle and the wind that can come off of there. I'm always in long sleeve shirts, even if it's just temporary and I've got something I can throw on top, but long sleeve shirts are important too. So we don't tend to see a whole lot of rain in the summertime. I'm sure you've heard about fire season. It is a thing here as well. Many more talks about fires and their role in the national parks and our forests and our animals can happen there too. But it can be rainy, it can be windy, had them all. So we got to come prepared. So what does that look like? Have a good pair of sturdy hiking shoes. If you go up to CMH and you have a pair of running shoes, you will be given a pair of proper hiking shoes. So if you've got sensitive feet, make sure you've got ones that work for you. And this is a safety perspective. If you've just got running shoes, they don't have a lot of ankle support, and CMH wants to make sure that our ankles, our feet, everything is kept happy. Of course, it's nice to have a pair of casual shoes to wear places, but I'll also have t-shirts, long sleeves, shorts, pants, toque, do you remember that word? Our beanies, sweaters. I bring a whole variety of clothes. Hiking poles. This one is up to you. At the CMH Lodge, they do have hiking poles. Discover Banff Tours, we also do have hiking poles with us there. So if you're struggling for room, but you think hiking poles are important for you, it's okay. We got you. So they're not absolutely necessary for you to bring. If you have ones that you love, by all means, you can bring them, but they are provided for you. Camera gear. Depends on how much you want to bring. I have a whole lot of stuff that I bring. So I do bring a long lens. I have my 100 to 500 for wildlife viewing. I have a landscape lens, so 14 to 24 that I can bring out. I also have an in between, a 70 to 200. I do bring them all. Tripods. If you would like to have a tripod, it's a good idea to bring one for many of our photo stops. I would recommend kind of a lighter weight tripod simply because some of our photo stops will be, all right, we're going to walk over here. And if you've got a big, giant, heavy tripod with you, this is something that might be a little bit more difficult. So find a lighter weight tripod, and a tripod is not necessary. You can capture wonderful photos without a tripod, so don't worry, but you can certainly enhance it by having the tripod. Throughout the photo trip, I will also be doing different photo talks so that we can work on how it is that we're going to be adjusting our settings, what our settings might mean. We'll talk about composition, and when we're running towards the end of our trip, likely at the CMH Lodge, we'll do some photo editing as well. So we'll try and include a lot of photography stuff into that, into the trips. Okay. Oh, binoculars. Bring binoculars too. We will have some, like I have some, DBT has them. So if you don't bring them, if they don't make the cut of things, we're happy to share. But if you're a person that really loves looking for wildlife, binoculars is a nice thing to do to bring as well. Not required at all. All right. I think that's it. I've tried to leave some time for questions and limit my rambling. I love the trip, guys. It's so much fun. Yeah, if there are any questions, please lay them on me.
All right, thank you so much, Leanne. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. So let me ask you, are we ever on water in this trip?
Like if you're asking about a canoe, we don't include that on the trip itself. But when we are at Emerald Lake, it is the time that people will choose to do that. It will be extra for you. I can't remember exactly how much it is. I think a canoe rental was like 100 Canadian maybe for an hour, and you can fit 2 or 3 people in there. So it's not that expensive. Emerald Lake is where we do tend to do that because we allot extra time and it's a lot less busy. Many people are familiar with either Moraine Lake or Lake Louise and do canoeing there. It's a lot more expensive, and yeah, it's also a lot more crowded. I've shown up and had seen massive lines for people to get on them. So we don't include it on the itinerary, but we have the option available if people are wanting to when we're at Emerald Lake.
Great, thank you so much. So is the transportation on the photo expeditions different from non-photo expeditions?
No, it'll be a similar one, just depending on the size of the group. But we do make sure that in on the trips that the every single person does get a window seat. Now, it is something that's difficult, and it's like a strange thing almost with the national parks that a lot of these companies have agreed to like in a sense kind of make sure that we are fully protecting our wildlife by designing our vehicles as such. So there are limitations for photo opportunities outside of the vehicles, but or sorry, within the vehicles, but we do make sure that we maximize on our photo opportunities, and every single person does have a window seat on all of them.
Great to know. Thank you so much. So you showed a picture of a group on top of a peak, and someone was wondering if the group did do some rock climbing to get to this location, and how difficult is the walking on this trip in general?
So I'm assuming it's the one, I can go back even to it. This one probably. This is at, sorry, crashing my table here. This is at CMH, and no, you don't have to be able to rock climb or do things like that. If you're talking about this picture, yes, obviously you're going to need to climb for this one. But for photos like this, nope, this was a group that just came up and we were doing a ridgeline walk. There are some areas where there can be more loose rocks. So depending on the group that you get allotted to, and what group you get allotted to is based on the feedback that you provide them, how comfortable you are with certain things. It impacts the terrain that you'll get dropped on. So sometimes you've got some more loose rock and people have to work quite a bit harder to get up that. And other times it's just kind of a simple ridge walk. And yes, we can see some rocky, but it's very stable footing. it's still nature. So stable is it's not like a cement flat walk, but it's not like having to rock climb up things. So no, you'll get ridge line opportunities and like peak opportunities, like being on top of peaks, regardless of what group, and they can make them pretty easy or they can make them hard. You do have to have a level of fitness and a level of confidence, but it's nothing. It's I don't want to scare you out of it. It's not. It can be done pretty easily.
What is the typical size of a hiking group that goes out?
So this can depend on how many people are at the lodge, but this group here is kind of a typical size. So I've had anywhere from, I don't know, about 5 to 10 people. And this will also include like a guide or two, depending on the groups. And they even plan it like, all right, well, they have to think about helicopter space, helicopter weight. Where are people going to go? Where are their guides? There's so many factors that go into it. So we can have a group of 10 that has two CMH guides, and they have intended for that group to create a natural split. One half of that group goes a lot farther, one group moves slower, and both groups get picked up when they're ready. So it depends on what we're doing for the activity. When we go on the Via Ferrata, it can be a group of 10 or so people as well. So sometimes quite small, but like 10 max kind of thing. And usually I find to be smaller.
Great, thank you. And as far as safety goes, we're not going to need to be tied with ropes to be by these cliffs or anything. It'll be pretty safe for us.
No, any of the normal hiking, all very, very safe. The guides there are absolutely incredible. We're not putting anybody in a spot where people are needing harnesses for the regular walks. The only time that that is on this Via Ferrata. But you only get to do the Via Ferrata if it is something that you're interested in. We have a lot of chats about, what the physical capabilities are for that. And this is completely safe as well. Harnesses and cables and everything. But for our day-to-day hikers, they will not see this. Most people don't see this. Most people are walking and just having a great time.
Good to know. Thank you so much. So, if I wanted to see wildflowers and I was there in July or August, is that a good time or is there a better time?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's so fun about the parks is that wildflower season. I mean, dandelions are out in plenty right now. I actually just drove through Kootenay and Banff National Parks on Sunday and Monday, and there's dandelions everywhere. So the bears are out feasting on these dandelions. But when the dandelions finish, then we just roll into a whole bunch of different flowers. So kind of starting in May into June, into July, into August, we just roll through different patterns of flowers. So the whole season is essentially flower season. It just depends on which flowers are blooming. And each year is very different. Last year, we had a very, very, very warm spring. And so all of our flowers were advanced by like 3 weeks. It was pretty crazy. It was there in, mid-July, and I'm seeing flowers that the year before I hadn't seen until mid-August. And one year at the beginning of our Rockies trips, we had snow still all over the place. So in when we were doing our heli hiking, not on the grounds necessarily in the national parks, but every year it's quite different. But we do see wildflowers and make sure to have that as a priority. July or August, great time to see wildflowers.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So, are we taking day hikes from the lodge, maybe taking lunch with us? Is that part of the itinerary?
Yeah, so what happens, we wake up, we have breakfast, we get split into our different groups. They do have lunches that they've made for us, so we get to order specific sandwiches. They've got lots of snacks, so you'll carry your lunch with you. If you don't have a backpack, they do have like light backpacks that people can bring. We'll go out in the morning, get dropped off, we go hiking. We'll typically stop for lunch, aka have a field meal. We'll sit down somewhere. I'm pretty sure shortly before this picture was taken, we just stopped and had our meal. So we'll sit, we'll eat our sandwiches. We'll either continue on hiking from there. Sometimes we get picked up after or before lunch, and we get deposited somewhere else to go for another walk. There is also the option of if at lunchtime or you just know in the morning you want to do a half day, you can get flown in at lunchtime as well. So it really opens up lots of opportunities. But yes, we have a packed lunch, we bring our packed lunch, and then we're out in the field. We want to maximize our time out there. So we're typically getting into the helicopters, depending on the group. The groups start, I believe it's around 9 a.m. breakfast at 8, first helicopter flies out at 9. Depending on the group, you can either come back at lunchtime. Sometimes groups are back around 3, 4, maybe 5 p.m. And regardless of what time you get back, they make sure that they've got time for people to relax. They have a happy hour with snacks, and then we have dinner. They basically feed you, and then they feed you, and then they feed you, and then they feed you. And in between feedings, you get to walk and see beautiful things. But it's really open to a lot of interpretation. But you do have a packed lunch that you'll have when we go out there.
And when we're out there, are restrooms something that we're going to have to worry about?
Restrooms. Well, the lovely thing is the world is your restroom. Nature breaks, they do happen. So we make sure, not in most of these pictures, it wouldn't be really obvious where it is that you're going to stop and take a bathroom break, but we do talk about how to take bathroom breaks. Obviously, it's a bit more challenging for women than it is for men, but there are areas where we're like, okay, well, we'll plan to go through here. It's a bit more of a treed area. We've got privacy, or a group kind of continues on and you stay behind the hill. But yeah, nature breaks happen. You get to look at the view you get to have while you take a pee, though. Come on, it's pretty great.
So let's talk about wildfires for a second. Is there a possibility that we could lose our trip or be postponed because of wildfires?
We've never had a trip get canceled or anything because of wildfires. I have to make sure I don't say wildflowers all the time. Wildfires, and we do try to specifically make sure that we plan our trips in times where we've reduced the chances of wildfires happening. So right now, you can't see it, my blinds are closed, but it is pouring with rain right now, and it has been like, again, I'm not far from the national parks. We typically have really wet springs, and then starting in July, we don't see rain happen again. So it's fire season, I say. Of course, year after year, it's different. We do tend to get a little bit happen in the spring, before all the rain starts, and then everything kind of dies down, and then everything's quite wet and saturated. We've got snow melt happening, and July and into August, we don't tend to have them. And then I find the worst time for our wildfires is typically kind of more the end of August, which is why we're not having trips that are ending at the end of August kind of time frame. So we have specifically planned it to design them so that we reduce the chances of fires impacting the trip. I have had trips, certainly I've gone into a welcome dinner, had beautiful skies, come out, the smoke has blown in from somewhere and the mountains are covered, but we woke up the next morning and the skies were clear again. So smoke can come in and come out sometimes. It can impact things, but we've never had it like cancel, ruin, or change the trips.
Great, thank you. Well,
Mhm.
unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for some closing comments.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. It is an awesome, awesome trip. The national parks are stunning. The hiking, I promise, if you feel intimidated based on these pictures, don't feel intimidated. There's so much for you to do when we go heli hiking, and yeah, I think it's just an absolutely beautiful trip and so much to see, so much to do, and it can be more active if you choose to, if you're a pretty active person. So please come out, join us. You can come nerd out with me, nerd out with our other expedition leaders who are also equally amazing at their nerdiness, and our DBT guides too. So it's a wicked trip. Please come join us. It's so fabulous. Thanks for joining.
Leanne, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.